When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ludlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everybody. This is Mark Ludlow with the Fearless Mindset Podcast, and today we bring you Sheryl from Southern California. She is the expert on the Imposter Syndrome, and she supports C-suite level executives and all types of people from all around the universe that comes into her universe. And this is a major problem dealing, with people in COVID-19 and, trying to reinvent themselves. Who am I? Where am I going? And Sheryl, I consider her a subject matter expert in this arena, and she's coming out with a new book coming out here soon, being published as we speak. Welcome to the show, Sheryl. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mark. So good to see you and hear you.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Sheryl. You're a busy lady. You told me that you shared that you don't have enough time in the day.
Yeah, like most of us these days, right? It's just getting busier and busier, but that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Got to learn how to conserve and use our energy wisely.
And what kind of advice can you get to the people that are running organizations, C-suite level executives, executive assistant, maybe even a CEO or vice president? What type of skill set do you offer them to give them balance?
Oh, that's such a good question. So, when I'm dealing with people at whatever level, but certainly in a leadership level and business owners, when we're talking about something like imposter syndrome, one of the things that we start with is just kind of for them to understand it within themselves, understand where it's coming from, how it might be showing up, and the cost. And then we start to work with how to get through it, how to get past it, working from the inside out, the outside in. Balance is a really great word. It feels, I always like to say balance is a myth because there really is no balance, but it's the pursuit of balance, right?
Right.
It's this pursuit of balance, that equilibrium. So one of the key things just in the balance equation is really understanding when we're out of balance and where it's showing up. And it's interesting because I have this whole process with imposter syndrome where we talk about the healthy zone, this middle zone. And when it gets outside of that, it becomes maladaptive. Well, the same thing happens when we're out of balance, right? All of a sudden we have all these costs that start to show up. Things start to shift in the wrong way. Things take up much more time and energy that really we shouldn't allot them, including our thoughts and our feelings. And they can just throw us off. And then if we stay in that area too long, that starts to become normal for us. We start to normalize it. So then we lose sight of what balance really is. What does that feel like not to have that? So a lot of what I do is just getting that awareness, starting with awareness.
And most people, they don't even know they have it. And your job is to create their awareness. They seek you out, and maybe they're having a problem in the workplace. Maybe they're just stressed out. Maybe they're on the verge of divorce or a relationship breakup, whatever, or they're just overwhelmed. And they're going back to work from COVID-19. Now their office is asking them to come back to work, and they're dealing with those underlying issues in the workplace. And they need your help to navigate those feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when you're really talking about the workplace, it's so interesting because the pandemic has changed everything, absolutely everything. And before the pandemic, 7 out of 10 people, I know, was there a time before the pandemic?
Right.
But before the pandemic, 7 out of 10 people identified as having this imposter syndrome experience. And since the pandemic and is obviously ongoing, that number's only increased. So it almost feels like everybody experiences this, which isn't true. It's just that such a large majority of people do in one form or another. Does that make sense? That it starts to feel like it's just normal, like everybody has it. But I don't believe that we should normalize it. I don't believe we should normalize it. As soon as we say something's normal, we set it in, right? That becomes like the set point. So I would say it's common, but it's not normal. Let's get past this. Let's really understand what normal is or should be for you. and let's get you to that place. Yeah. And, if I can say this, Mark, one of the things you said is, how do people know if they have it? And it's been surprising to me in my market research. I thought, well, most people are going to understand. But a lot of people don't really understand what imposter syndrome is. So there's confusion about what it is. And I've had so many people show up, it's actually eye-opening, that don't think they have it. And then as they listen and they understand this framework I use, they'll say, oh my God, wow, I have it. I've got imposter syndrome. And they start to understand the costs. And then there's this feeling of, okay, wait, I want to do something about it.
And so you're the key to unlock those, whatever those thoughts, feelings, emotions are. They use you as the key because they don't know where the key's at. They got to find that key. And once you get that key and unlock that lock, and then you can start pulling whatever that is out of them.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And I think just having that framework, if I may, why don't I share with you what kind of this definition I use of imposter syndrome is, and just give you the framework real quickly.
Sure.
So the definition is that it's a psychological pattern where somebody feels like they're not good enough in spite of their accomplishments. So if you think about that phrase, I use the word pattern. It's a psychological pattern, which means it's habitual. It kind of gets baked in, like we're doing certain things on autopilot. And that includes our beliefs, our thoughts, the way we talk to ourselves, that internal dialogue. And then in spite of, because there's a disconnect. So they feel like they're not good enough in spite of their accomplishments. So these are people that are highly accomplished. Top CEOs, C-suite executives, celebrities, influencers, and everyday people. But as somebody has more accomplishments or they're more well-known, they might feel like they're going to be more exposed, because somebody that's experiencing imposter syndrome feels like they're going to be exposed at any moment as a fake or a fraud or a phony. Like they're going to find me out, that I'm not as good as they think I am. So we don't believe ourselves.
Right. Do you think American culture is like a crock pot that manifests that more than any other country in the world? What's your thoughts on the culture of America? And, we have social media, we have the magnification of, different influencers on different social media platforms, with especially the teenagers. Is that going to be a bigger deal with teenagers with social media? What's your thoughts on like TikTok and stuff like that?
It's so interesting. That's a really, really great segue that you brought up, because what you're talking about is external influences, because there's this in the internal environment, which kind of comes from our childhood when we're very young, and it just gets layered in. So that's kind of how we feel on the inside. But what are those external triggers, right? And I would not say that the American culture is more or less than other cultures. I'd rather say that it's different. Okay. So, for example, in many cultures that are very patriarchal, women are really suppressed and put down, and their voice doesn't matter. So for a woman in many cultures, or, there can be other external cultural influences, like don't talk about your accomplishments because you're going to be arrogant. You're going to be seen as bragging or arrogant. Mm-hmm. You need to be humble. You need to keep subverting yourself. In our culture, we have a lot of these influences as well. Yeah. Comparing ourselves, because comparison is the big one. So you talk about social media and people comparing, there's bullying that takes place on social media, but frankly, there's bullying that takes place in the workplace too.
Totally true. Didn't think about that.
Yeah. Bullying takes place everywhere. So these external stimuli that are triggering can trigger somebody even when they're really confident, because we're human, right? We all have some doubts and fears and limiting beliefs, and that's just kind of part of our makeup. We're human. They can be triggering, but a really confident, and I mean internal confidence, not the kind of the confidence that we put on to the outside world, but that internal, like really high self-esteem, they can deal with that a little better. They know where to put it. They know how to handle somebody when they see that, or they know how to set it aside, not give it as much weight. Where somebody that's really kind of lacking in that, feeling good enough or worthy or deserving, that could be much more triggering for them.
Now, if they get into that trigger situation, what's a good safe place for someone to start evolving and growing internally to get over the self or the imposter syndrome issue? What's the first couple steps you advise them? To reach out to you, of course, read your book, and then probably book a consult with you to do a step-by-step program or something like that.
Yeah. So I'm putting together this collection of tools to really help people. So it's not just situational. It's not just in that moment, but we can really get past imposter syndrome for good. It's not just about coping. However, in the meantime, as process is taking place, here are a couple of quick tips. So the first one is there's always an emotional component, right? So something is happening. We feel the emotion in our body. So notice that if you feel fear, because we talk about fear a lot, right, on your podcast, you'll feel it in your body. Maybe it's in your stomach. Maybe your heart starts to beat. Maybe you break out in sort of a cold sweat or whatever it is, but there's actually a physical reaction. So we have an emotion, there's a physical reaction. And if our mind gets involved, we can start to turn up the heat, so to speak, or have it spin more, when you feel like your emotions are spinning out of control. Mm-hmm. So let's say something comes up and you're a little fearful of it.
Sure.
And then that can attach to doubt, and that can attach to sadness or blame or guilt or shame. Any of these emotions can start to attach. So let's say I'm in an environment and I feel like I'm being racially triggered, or I'm being triggered because I'm a woman. Mm-hmm. I might be fearful about saying something, because if I say something, there are repercussions. And what does that look like for me? I might feel sad and lonely. I might get angry. I might have all these emotions that start to hook together and they start to spin. So the very first thing I do, and I suggest that other people do, is slow that momentum down. Take some really deep breaths, first and foremost, because we end up in that fight or flight part of the brain.
Sure, right? Sure.
We end up in that. Yeah. So if you breathe really deeply, almost like you're trying to pull it down into your belly, and then you hold it and let it go, you can start to slow your emotions down, and you move yourself from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system.
Right.
So now it's almost like your logical brain can speak to your emotional brain.
The connection re-engages.
Yeah. The connection re-engages. So you slow yourself down, you stop the spinning, you unhook the emotion. So first thing I do is I call them out. What am I feeling? And I might even talk to myself in the third person. This works really well. Step outside yourself. You might say, hey, Mark, all right, what are you feeling right now? Let's look at that. Let's unhook those, look at them. And you can do it pretty quickly in your mind. One by one. Fear, is it real? What's the worst thing that can happen? Do I even have any control over it? Right? If I don't have any control over it, let's let it go. What are some choices I have? What are some things I can do? Because that's really all I need to be concerned about. Right?
Okay.
Am I feeling sad? Okay, I'm going to honor that. Oh, that would make me sad too. I get that. So honor those emotions. So that's the very first thing, because the emotions, if they're not honored, they get suppressed, they get pushed down. If they're expressed, they can be gone really, really quickly, like in 17 seconds.
I always heard when you're in chaos and conflict, or you approach or have a conflicting situation you're dealt with, you have a first reaction, second reaction, and third reaction. And I've learned as I've grown older, gotten more mature in my life, to take a step back. Say you just been hit with chaos. Instead of getting pissed off and angry and upset, pull back from the situation and let it just let it put on the shelf for a day. Come back to it the next day, because you're probably the way you feel, and your emotional connection of anger is going to change within 24 hours. Yeah. And you can reassess and go, is it really this bad? Is it really life-changing? And I've always been, especially in business where I'm at, in the business world, things go south all the time. And you're like, okay, take a step back. Don't react. Younger, being a Marine, I always react to situations like, just want that masculinity to come in and just pop through the glass door and shatter it. But I've learned, take a step back, give myself a day, 2 days. Let's say I'm going through a breakup with another girlfriend and she doesn't hear me, she's not hearing me, then I want to get my message across. Wait a minute. Maybe she's shutting down, and right now is not the time to get that message across. Maybe you need to separate and give it 24, 38 hours and have a conversation. 4 or 5 days away, give her a call back. Yeah. And I think people are so quick to try to resolve the emotions, but the emotions have to go through their cycles to heal themselves, to be able to get that strength to feel and express.
Yeah, absolutely. I call that practicing the pause. And you can train yourself to do that, which it sounds like you did, right?
Marine Corps taught me that.
Yeah. And sometimes it's harder than others. There are times where the emotions are overwhelming, which is why if you can do the deep breathing and slow them down and keep that internal dialogue. I'm going to wait. Let me hold on. So a couple things that happen. One, we talked about the emotions get out of control. They gain their own momentum. So we slow them down, still them. The second thing is that we jump into the fight or flight, that response center. So when we do the deep breathing, we get into the parasympathetic nervous system, which gives us so much more control to respond and not react. But the third thing is that and I just forgot the third thing.
That's all right.
But it will come back, I promise.
It will come back. Now, let's dive in. It'll come back. I'm going to change the subject so your memory will probably recall it here in a minute.
Yeah.
But before you got into this, you're a corporate executive. You're a big player in corporate. Let's dive back into your background a little bit so people know who Sheryl is, because you used to be you are a big deal because of what you did in your past life, executive leadership and everything that you did.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's highlight that.
Yeah. I mean, in so many ways, I think that a lot of people consider me fearless because it's not that I didn't have fear, but I would push through it. I was a single mom for a long time. I was divorced when my son was 3.
Oh.
I was an executive at that time. I wasn't a senior executive, but I was an executive and doing some interesting things, and then dove off into my first venture. And so I was a 3-time entrepreneur. In my third business, one of my big clients, which was a healthcare company, asked me to come on as their full-time senior VP of marketing and communications, which was like a CMO in that organization, $1 billion company. And then I was also a CMO and president of another company, $1 billion company after that. So I've been around the barn. In other words, I've been in the barn, I've been around the barn. I've worn a lot of hats, from just being that entrepreneur, having to make things happen, to helping really early stage companies. In fact, one of the people I worked with, I helped build 2 companies with. And he was Steve Jobs' right-hand guy back in the early days. Yeah, very interesting guy, best-selling author, and learned a lot from him, but I helped him build 2 companies. So I've gotten to kind of see and do a lot of things. I also worked with a military guy. So I did my strategy with the guy who was the architect of the first Gulf War. He was the head of Air Force strategy. And he basically put together that strategy in under 48 hours with over 200 people, actually over 300 people. They came in and out of a room, handed it to Schwarzkopf. And I think
Colonel Schwarzkopf.
And then to Colonel Schwarzkopf, Colin Powell, and then to Colonel Schwarzkopf. And so that was very interesting. And so I think just remaining open. And practicing the pause, as we talked about, which is not freeze. That was the third thing I wanted to mention is
there you
pausing
go.
doesn't mean that you freeze. It just means that you're choosing a response rather than reacting.
And when
you're
you
giving
freeze,
some time.
You go into, I know people call it shock. They freeze up, and that's their brain telling them they can't go further because they don't know what to do because they haven't experienced it before.
Right. So and freeze is not good. We need to take action, but pause is a very positive thing. So understanding the distinction is really, really helpful, right? Because sometimes we need to pause, and sometimes we have an active pause. So it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. We may be pausing, but our mind is working certain things out.
Crazy how it's wired. It's amazing.
Yeah, creative, right?
It's a machine. What it does and what it can do is keep our body going, healing, everything. It's just the mind is a very powerful organ for sure.
Yeah.
So you have done some stuff in the military, you've done stuff in the healthcare organization, and now you've got your consulting corporation, and you're rocking and rolling. And then, are you enjoying this phase of your life more so than the past? What's the advice you give to women who want to do what you're doing? What's your advice to the single moms out there that are raising a kid? They don't know what to do.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much advice. I wish I could give you a 30-second, but believe in yourself first and foremost. So I think that if we start with this belief in ourselves and this idea that we can bring in, draw to us, attract the people, the resources, if it fits with our purpose, what really drives us, what makes us happy, it will happen, and when it doesn't happen, and this is a little spiritual, but it's maybe just that we're not meant to go there. Maybe we're being kind of nudged in a different direction. And so stay fluid, stay open to that.